Okay, so yesterday you guys wrote these rules down. So today I'm going to go back and talk about why these things are important. So, significant figures. There's a set of rules for what significant figures are, and then there's rules for calculations. We're going to do calculations tomorrow. Okay, so today we just need to be able to identify what significant figures are. You wrote this down. I always say this, and every year when I say this, people look at me like I'm crazy. But if you just kind of think and let it just absorb for just a minute, is what it means. It'll make sense. You can only be as accurate as your least accurate measurement. Think about that. You can only be as accurate as your least accurate measurement. If you are running in a team race, you can only be as fast as what? Your slowest person, right? So if you're trying to get a time, the slowest person running is going to cost you points, right? So it's the same kind of concept. If you're trying to be as accurate as you can be, what's going to limit your accuracy? The least accurate measurement. Does that make a little bit more sense? Okay? All right. So in terms of if when you look at a value, how do you know if a number is significant or not? How can you tell? Well, the easy part is this. Non-zero digits are sig figs. What does it mean to be a non-zero? Not zero. So 1 through 9. Right? Does that make sense? Write that down for me right there beside it. Okay. So any numbers, not a zero, 1 through 9, they'll always be significant no matter where they are in the number. Well, the zeros are what get people. Okay, that's the problem that everyone has. So let's look at the zero rules. Now, here's the thing about these rules. You do not have to memorize these rules. I'm not asking you that. The method that I'm going to teach you in just a minute will teach these rules to you without even realizing it. But the reason I teach you these rules is because the method that we use to figure out significant figures encompasses this. That's the reason the method works. So if you see these, you can understand why the method does work. All right, so how do we know if a zero is significant? So here's the key. First of all, it's if and only if it adheres to these rules. So the first one, it is terminating. I'm going to come back to that word, but that's where everybody looks at it and says, I don't know what that means. We'll talk about it in a second. It's terminating and. What does it mean by and? It's got to be both. Very good. It's terminating and to the right of the decimal. Now, I feel that you guys understand what it means to be right of the decimal. That's the easy part. The terminating part is the issue. What does it mean to be terminated? Eliminated. What does it mean to be terminated? It's at the end. You're at the end of your existence if you are terminated. All of you think of the movie The Terminator and all the killing and bloodshed. No, okay. So terminating means at the end. Now here's the important question. When you read a number, just like when you read a sentence, in what direction do you read a value? From left to right. Okay? So what is the technical end of the number when you're reading it? What side is it on? The right side. So let's add that in too, because I think that may clear it up. So really what we're talking about is the right end. Now, not the right wrong, the right left end. Does that make sense? We're talking about the direction. All right. So that's how a zero is significant. I understand that that is hard to visualize. So give me a minute. We'll come back to it. The next one is really easy. If it is sandwiched between real numbers. Let me give you an example. That zero, is it sandwiched between real numbers? Yes. What are the real numbers? 1 and 1, and the zeros between them. So would you agree that that zero is significant? So if you went to Wendy's, that's a single patty, right? Well, what happens if you got this? Oh, actually, erase this. My apologies. Come back. 1,000,001. Are those numbers still sandwiched? It's a really big sandwich, but they're still sandwiched, right? So it doesn't matter how many zeros you have as long as they're still sandwiched. So 1 versus all 5. Okay, does that make sense? All right, I need you to add one more thing here. Okay? In the past, I've realized that this has come into play a little bit, and I never really focused on it, but I've finally have succumbed to the issue of it this year, is that I'm going to teach it. Is if you see a 0 and you see a bar above it, we're going to count that 0 as significant. Now, here's the problem. In your years past, in your math classes, when you saw a bar above a value, what did that mean? Repeating. But that must have always been above what kind of number? A decimal. It doesn't have to be a decimal. This bar is going to be above a 0. Okay, now zeros can repeat, obviously, but it's going to be a little bit different context. And I think you'll be able to visualize it. Just kind of, you'll see an example in just a minute. So these are the 3 rules for zeros. If it's terminating and to the right of the decimal, if it's sandwiched between real numbers, or if it has a bar above it. So let me give you an example of the bar. So if it's like 1350 and there is a bar above it, does that make more sense? So is that 0 significant? Yes, so you treat it like it's a real number. You treat it like it's a 1 through 9. And like I said, you'll see more examples of that in a second. To identify it as significant. Okay? So let me ask you something. If I said it's about 1350-ish, that could be anywhere from 1300 to 1359, right? This number with the bar tells me it is exactly 1350. So do you see the difference? Okay, very good. All right, so let's go back to... Is it hot in here? It is blazing hot in here. Sorry. You got real bad jokes. All right. What? Oh, that's true. Very good. That is very true. I appreciate that. All right, so I know what you're thinking. Flip that sheet of paper over. And when you see this, the first time you see it, you look at it, you're like, why in the world is he giving me something with a map on it? And we're talking about chemistry and significant figures. What in the world does that have to do with anything? And you're right, it does look a little silly. However, the method that we're going to use for significant figures is called the Pacific Atlantic Rule. A little side note here. After teaching for 6 years, I have come to the conclusion that the youth of America are awful at geography. I'd be willing to bet that 99% of you could not properly label every single state correctly on this entire map. And that is an atrocious fact. It doesn't matter. You should at least be... This is not the Middle East or Africa. I can't do the continent of Africa, but you should at least be able to do the United States of America. And I'll go ahead and tell you where you're going to mess up. You're going to mess up in here, and you're going to mess up in there. The rest of them, and you may have a few issues in this general vicinity, but most of them, okay, but it's sad. It's sad our America's youth can't even label America. I'm not even going to get into state capitals. That's a whole nother issue. Okay? All right, so here's what I want you guys to write. So write this above the map. So whenever we were working on those density problems, I always asked the exact same question first. What was always the very first question? What are you looking for? What's the question? Okay, that doesn't apply here. There's another question. If you guys will learn over the years as I teach, is I'm very methodical in my approach. I'll always do things the exact same way. So what I have been able to develop over the years is this method that always works. So I know that for every single problem, if I ask myself the same set of questions, I'm never going to get it wrong. And so when we look at density, whenever we look at word problems, we need to ask ourselves, what are we looking for? And once we find what we're looking for, how does the data get us to our result? Okay. In this case, my very first question is going to be, is the decimal point present or absent? That's going to be my first question. So how does a map have anything to do with that? Well, let's kind of jump into that. Here, do me a favor. First of all, what coastline is the Pacific Ocean on? The west, not the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Okay. So do me a favor. Underneath Pacific, please write the word present. Okay. Now, what coastline is our Atlantic Ocean on? The East Coast. Now, using your context, what's wrong? Okay. Using your context clues, what word do you think we're going to write under Atlantic? Absent. Amazing. Now, just kind of throwing this little curveball at you, there's another body of water that surrounds us. Where is it and what's it called? Thank you, Jesus. We got the Gulf of Mexico. I'd be willing to bet that none of you could correctly label our Great Lakes either, could you? Nope. I'm just saying. All right, so here's how this is going to work. Really, this is just a mnemonic device. It's just a memory trick for you guys to be able to use this to count your number of significant figures. Now, the rules we just went over, again, you don't have to memorize them, but this method will tell you how to do it based on the rules, but it's just a memory device that we're going to use. So we've already got the basics down, so I'm going to zoom this in just a little bit. We are going to change the rules because of how it's written. I don't like how it's written, so give me just a second. So again, I told you a minute ago, my first question when we're counting significant figures is always going to be what? Okay, is the decimal point present or absent? So our first examples is going to be if the decimal point is present. So if we say yes to that. All right. So what side do you think we're going to start on? We're going to start on the Pacific side, which is what side of that value? The left side. We're going to start on the left side of that value. Now, so we're going to begin counting on, I want you guys to circle this for me, the left-hand side, the Pacific side, and do me a favor, I want you to scratch out the word number and change it to the word value. Now, the reason I don't like the word number there is because when I say what is the number, can the word number imply one digit? But when you hear the word value, what does that represent? The whole thing, right? So all numbers aren't one number, they're a value. All right, so we're going to begin counting on the Pacific side or the left-hand side of the value. Now, this is where it's going to get weird. I want you to scratch this whole rest of this top sentence out. We're not going to use that. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Okay? So we're going to make it proper. We're going to come down here and we're going to capitalize our S, make it grammatically correct. And then this is what it says. We're going to start with our what? First non-zero digit. The first one. Now, what are non-zeros? 1 through 9. So we're going to start on the left, and we're going to find our first non-zero. And then this is what we're going to do. This is the part that you have to add. Count it. Count it and everything to the right. I'll give you a second to copy that, and I promise you I'm going to explain this if this sounds kind of weird. Okay? So one more time. The first question is the decimal point present or absent? If you respond to me, it is present. Now let me ask you, this is a silly question. How do you know if it's present or absent? There's a decimal. You use your eyeballs, right? Okay? You don't use blood. You don't use fingers like you use your eyeballs. You look for it. There it is. Okay? You can put your finger on it. So you begin counting on the left-hand side, the Pacific side of the value. And we're going to start with the first non-zero digit. And we're going to count, not count. Wow, that was really bad. Why didn't you stop? Why didn't y'all correct me? We're going to count it and everything to the right. So let's look at our first example. So my silly question is the decimal point present or absent? How can you tell that it's present? It's literally right there in the number. Okay? So my follow-up question is, what side are we going to start on because it's present? We're going to start on the left-hand side because it's present, right? Pacific, present. We're going to go to our first what? Non-zero. What is the first non-zero starting on the left? 3. And then read that purple pink. What are we going to do? Count it and everything to the right. So how many total numbers did you just count there? 7. Does that match our value? Does that make sense? Any questions? All right, let's look at the next one. Is the decimal point present or absent? How can you tell it's present? You can see it with your eyeballs. Okay? So since it's present, what side are we going to start on? Start on the left, the Pacific side. We're going to go to our first what? Non-zero, which is what? 1. And then what are we going to do in the purple pink? Count it and everything to the right. So how many total numbers did you get there? 4. Very good. Now, I know this. I get this question every year. Why in the world would you put the decimal point behind that 1,200? This is why. Can I give you exactly $1,200? I can. I can hand you exactly $1,200. How many 100s would that be? 12. 1,200. 1,200s. All right. So, could I give you $1,200-ish? That could be $1,299 all the way down to $1,200. But as soon as you put that decimal point at the end, does that tell me that those zeros are now significant values? So it's exactly 1,200. Does that make sense? All right. These next two are where everyone gets in trouble every year. Okay? If you don't follow the rules, you're not going to get this right. My question is, for example, number 3, is the decimal point present or absent? It's present. How can you tell? You see it. What side are we going to start on? The left. And this is the part where everyone kind of gets thrown off. What do you start with first? The first non-zero. So that's not a non, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0. Do any of those count? No. So the only one that counts is which one? The 4. Does that make sense? If you follow the rules, it should. I'm going to explain in this next reason why it matches the rules that you wrote on the back of the paper in just a second. So what's the only difference from the 3rd example to the 4th example? They added a 0 at the end. So let's look at the example. Let's follow the rules. Present or absent? Present, we're going to start on the left. Start with the what? First non-zero. That's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0. So I got to go to 4. I'm going to count it and everything. So adding the 0 to the end now makes it what? 2 significant figures. And here's why this works. If you go back to your rules, if I can get them up. Read this first bullet. If it's terminating, what does terminating mean? At the end. Is that 0 at the end? And right of the decimal. Is it right of the decimal? Then it is significant. So does the method match the rules? Yes. So now do you see why I don't make you memorize these? Because the method teaches you the rules? All right. So here's what I want you guys to do. To the right of that area that we were just working in, I want you to write these numbers down and see if you can determine how many significant figures there are in this in these answers. Okay, write those things down and see if you can determine how many significant figures there are in those 4. All right, start with your first non-what? First non-zero, which is what number? 1, count it, and what? Everything to the right. Okay, so how many total did you get, Mason? 4, very good. Okay, coming down the road next, Jillian, 22,300.00. Decimal point present or absent? Present. Start on the left. Go to your first what? Non-zero, which is what value? 2. Count it and everything to the right. So how many total did you get? Very good. Real quick, how many of you got the first one right? Have you got the second one right? Okay, very good. Nyla, 26.0. Present or absent? Excuse me, Nini. Nyla sits right there. Nini. Present, start on what side? The left. Go to your first non. Okay, go to your first non-zero, right? Go to the first non-zero, which is 2. Count it and everything to the right. Everything. So how many you got? 3, very good. How many of you got that one right? Fantastic. Here's the one where it always kind of falls apart. Seth, present or absent? Present. Go to your first non-what? That's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0. So what do you start with? 2, count it and everything to the right. So how many of you guys got? How many of you got that one right? Is this easier than you thought it was going to be? I told you, it's a foolproof method. It never fails. I think it's easy. I'm not a good teacher. It's just easy. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I mean, that's why I'm here. It's my job. That's what I'm paid to do. All right, so here's the follow-up question. What happens if that little dot that I said you find with your eyeballs disappears? Okay, so this is the deal. If it disappears, it's the same concept. The rules just kind of flip themselves over. So if the decimal point is absent, we're going to start on the Atlantic side, which is what side of the value? We're going to start on the right-hand side this time. So it's the same concept. We just flip everything over. Okay, so begin counting on the right or the Atlantic side of the, and again, we're going to change this to value. Okay, and we're going to scratch through all of this. Okay, and we're going to capitalize our S to make sure it's grammatically correct. So we're going to start with the what again? The first non-zero digit. And what are we going to do? Count it, and this is where it gets a little different. Everything to the left. Very good. So nothing changes except we're going to start on the opposite side and go the other way. So we're going to slide to the left. I'm not dancing for you. You know that song. I will sing a song for you, though, one day. I do have a song. You'll have to hear it later. I'm building up suspense to it. No, I'm a terrible singer, but I'm going to sing it anyways. All right, so when we look at the bottom number, the two examples we have. So we've got we've got 1,200. So this is a little different from the number we had earlier because the decimal fell off, okay? It disappeared. So because of that, if the decimal point is absent, what side are we starting on? The right-hand side. Same exact concept here. We're going to go to our first non-zero. That's a 0, that's a 0. So we're going to start at 2 and count to the left. So how many is that? Does that make sense? Okay. I'm not even going to explain the last one, but does it make sense while the last one is 4? We all good with that? All right, so let's practice a little bit more. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do the first column together. And at the end, we'll go back and we'll make sure everybody has the right one, okay? So, Sloan, we're going to come down to you. And we're just going to go down the column. What does down the column mean? Down, not across. We're going down, okay? All right, so I'm going to ask these 7 questions the exact same way each time. And so, again, you're going to hear the method that I use to make sure this is going to work, okay? So, the first question, number 1. Present or absent? Absent. We're going to start on what side? The right. Go to your first non-zero, which is, and count it and, so how many you got? 2. Very good. Okay. Next, Caleb. 3,400. Present or absent? Absent. Start on the which side? So go to your first what? Which is what number? Count it and, very good. So how many you got? 2. Everybody good so far? Do I need to slow down a little bit? You tell me. Okay. All right, Hunter. 0.0034. Same exact question. This is the kind of the tricky ones. Present or absent? Present. Start on what side? The left side. Okay. So go to your first what? Which is what value? And count it and, so how many you got there? Very good. Any questions on that one? Again, those are the ones that throw everybody off. Okay, Erica, 34.0, present or absent. Start on what side? The left, count, go to your first, which is, count it and, very good, which is, 3. Right? 3? Okay. Just out of curiosity, this is kind of a student-teacher feedback. Do you like how I say the same things over and over? And again, that's the way that I learn, so I want to make sure that you guys are on the same page. All right, so Emily, this is the one that this is also weird. We've talked about this. What do you notice that's funny about this one that's not like any of the others we've done? The bar. We've already talked about it. What does the bar tell you about that 0? You have to count it. It's significant. Okay. So instead of it being 3,400-ish, it's exactly 3,400, and the 0 is in the tens place, right? So the only leeway you have is in that ones place. So we know it's exactly a 0. So we treat it like it's a 1 or a 9. Okay. So is the decimal point present or absent? It's absent. So what side are we going to start on this time? The right side. Now, this is, again, weird. We're going to go to our first non-0, but what do we know about that 0? We count it. Very good. So we're going to start with it and go which direction? Left. Very good. So how many you got? 3. Like I said, the ones with the bars are the ones that the decimal numbers and the bars throw people off. Okay? All right, Nasir, this one's weird, but it's easy. Present or absent? Start on what side? The right. Go to your first non. 8. And so how many you got there? Just 1. Okay. Finally, Madison. What's present or absent? Absent start on what side? Absent start on the Atlantic side, right? Okay, so we're going to start over here. Go to your first non-0, which is what? And how many you got in there? Just 1. Any questions on any of those? All right, see if you guys can do 2 through 35. Don't do any of the rest of them, just that top little group. Okay, Heidi, we're going to start with you, and we're going to work our way down the row, and all I'm going to do is call out the number of the questions so guys kind of stay with me. So this is how, again, I'm not going to ask the procedure, I just want the answers, okay? Heidi, what about number 2? Again, if you have an issue, if you get it wrong, just put a little star beside it, and we'll come back and we'll answer your questions about, hey, can you explain why that's wrong? Okay, all right, Jada, number 7. Next, Meg. 3, next. 4, next. 2, very good, next. Noah. Very good. Okay, Jaquarius, number 32. Very good. Everybody got 7 on that one, right? That's sandwiched. Even though it's a lot of zeros, it's still sandwiched. Okay, next, going back up to number 3, Aaron. 3, very good, next. 2, good, next. 2, good, next. 4, good, James. Number 23. 3, very good. Naya. 3, very good. Coming down, next. 4, Emma Brooke. 4, very good. Next. 1, good. Everybody got 1 on number 9, correct? Okay, next. 1, okay, back over here to you, Sloan. Number 19. 3, very good. Seth. Very good. 4, everybody got 4 on 24, correct? Okay, all right. Nene, number 29. Very good. 5, okay. 34, Jillian. 2, Mason, number 5 at the top. 3, Madison, number 10. 2, very good. Nasir, 15. 2, good, coming on down. 4, good, next. 4, good, next. 3, and I'm going to stop right there. How dare I? So let's look at that last one. Every year I get argued with about, is it or is it not? I really don't care. How many of you put a 1 there? How many of you put a 0 there? How many of you put the question mark? All right. Technically, it's both. Okay? All right, but just like I asked, can you have 0 things? You can, okay? And so in that case, it is specific and significant that there is 0. In my wallet right now, I have $0 bills. 0. None. Okay? That's called broke. All right? But according to the rules, there is no decimal, and you don't count zeros. So how do we treat a zero? It's both. It's significant yet insignificant. How is it both? And that leads me into something we're going to talk about later of what electrons are. Are they particles or are they waves? And I'll leave you with that.